You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
Hey everyone, I hope you're doing well. Today I have something a little different from you, something a little out of the norm for this podcast, and that is that my wife Mary Jane's going to join me to discuss the 1949 film Lost Boundaries. It is producer Louis de Rochemont's screen adaptation of the true story of Dr. Albert Johnston and his wife Thyra and how they pass as a white couple for nearly 20 years. Now, if you haven't done so already, I encourage you to go back and listen to the previous episode of this podcast. I titled that A White Lie, and that may help to put some of what we discuss into better context. So Mary Jane and I sat down to record this the other day. It was on Sunday, and not only do we talk about the movie, but we also briefly discussed the 1989 documentary in which both Thyra Johnston and her son Albert were interviewed. That was very, very interesting. So after you listen to us talk about both productions, if you'd like to watch one or both of them, what I'll do is I'll place a link to the films in both the show notes for this episode and also on my website, uselessinformation.org. Anyway, enough of me blabbing on. Let's roll the tape.
Useless information.
Well, Mary Jane, thanks for joining me today. Now, I checked, and it's been a long time since it's been on the podcast. It's almost 3 years, December of 2022. Now, I'd love to say you've been on vacation this whole time, but it's just actually the complete opposite. So why don't you just do a quick overview?
Sure. I was surprised it was 3 years also. No, I had to take some coursework. I switched from being a French teacher to an E&L teacher. So I was pretty busy doing coursework for quite a while and then just kind of learning the ropes of being an E&L teacher.
And I guess we should explain that E&L is English as a new language, which used to be called ESL, English as a second language.
Right. Pretty much just the state of New York has changed the name of that type of teaching, simply because a lot of the kids we get actually speak many languages when they come to us. So it's far from their second language. Sometimes it's their third or fourth.
And how many do you speak?
I can speak about 3. French is my much stronger language.
Anyway, let's dive into the movie review. The movie we're doing is Lost Boundaries from 1949. This is a black and white movie that ran 99 minutes or an hour and 39 minutes. It was produced by Louis de Rochemont and directed by Alfred L. Worker. This was filmed mostly in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and some of the surrounding areas, so it's kind of an on-location movie. And, of course, many of the locals are cast in roles for this. It did win the 1949 Cannes Film Festival Award for Best Screenplay. That was for writers Eugene Ling and Virginia Shaler. So I thought we'd start with a brief overview. Is that good?
I think, yeah, that's a great idea.
So I just jotted this down on a piece of scrap paper. It takes place over a 25-year period, I'd say from the mid-1920s through maybe the early to mid-1940s. And it follows the life of Dr. Scott Carter, that's Mel Ferrer, and his wife Marcia Carter, who's played by Beatrice Pearson. And of course, it begins with him graduating medical school, his difficulty getting a residency in a hospital, him being forced to basically hide the truth that he's a black man. So the couple's forced to live as a white couple, and they keep this secret from both the town that they live in, which is known as Keene, New Hampshire. It's a fictitious town, and they keep the secret from their children. And eventually the movie culminates with them revealing that secret to the children. As I've already mentioned, it's the screen adaptation of the real-life story of Dr. Albert and Thyra Johnston. So Mary Jane, why don't you take it from there?
Yes, and we also watched Home to Keene, Lost Boundaries Reunion, which was a documentary made in 1989 by the New Hampshire PBS. It is actually 1 year after the death of Dr. Johnston, and in this documentary, it's a very interesting interview with the mother, Thyra, and the son, Albert.
Yes, and we will talk a little bit about that. We'll talk mostly about the movie, but we'll talk a little bit more about the documentary, which was very, very interesting.
Yes, right.
Well, when I recorded the real story in my last episode, there's what I said about this movie. There's something that's really, really jarring about it. And what was that?
Well, the people who are supposed to be biracial or mixed race are, in fact, totally white.
Yeah, they chose white actors to portray the black people in this movie. It really threw me off, I have to say. Now, we've watched the movie twice at this point, and the first time, I'd say for the first half hour of the movie, every time Mel Ferrer said, "I'm Negro," it just set me back.
Yes, it was almost funny in a strange way. It just seemed so improbable, and yes, I agree. But I did want to say this is 1949, and in Hollywood at that time, most minorities were actually played by white people, and even older women were often played by very young women. You know, they would just put their hair up in a bun or, dye their hair a bit white. And so this is kind of typical Hollywood, even though in other aspects, it's a very unusual movie.
Yeah, it just didn't sit well with me. The second time through, I had already seen the movie and I was used to it. And I jokingly said this to you, couldn't they have at least gotten a tan before they started this movie? They didn't just choose white leads for this movie. They chose people who were very white. And I am certain there were people in Hollywood who had darker skin than that. I consider myself Caucasian, but I have to tell you, I think my skin might be darker than theirs was,
Right. Well, I know the director did say, I don't know if this is an excuse, but he said he could not find any fair-skinned African Americans to play the part. But it does seem a little disingenuous.
Yeah. Now, I should point out this is Mel Ferrar's first lead role. Both him and Beatrice Pearson, who plays his wife, they were veteran stage actors.
Right.
Now, he did claim a few years after this movie came out that he was 1/16 African American, but it definitely doesn't show at all. Now, as I'm watching this, I was thinking back to a podcast I did many, many years ago. This is podcast number 48 on Clarence King. And I think you've heard this story several times from me. But basically, he was the man who founded the United States Geological Survey. He was a very, very prominent person. He was famous all across the country. But what people didn't know is he had a secret life. Now, here's a guy who had blue eyes, very light complexion. He would live as a white man during the day, and then at night, this is in Manhattan, then what he would do is take the ferry into Brooklyn and live with his black wife, with his black children, and, he told his wife he was black, and, who would ever, back then, in the late 1800s, want to, basically live their life as a black man. So because he said it, if you had one drop of black blood, you believed it. And it wasn't until he was on his deathbed that she actually learned the truth that she was married to a white man and what his real name was. He was living under an alias. And, that's when she found out the truth. Anyway, so in that sense, I guess we're supposed to accept that they are black people with very, very light skin. But still, it threw me off.
Yeah, me too. And throughout it, even the second viewing, it threw me off.
Yeah. Now, Mary Jane, as you know, this story was based on a Reader's Digest story that was published 2 years prior. And the whole idea was Louis de Rochemont didn't want to spend a lot of money to make a movie if no one was going to watch it. So he arranged to have the story published in Reader's Digest first. It was wildly successful. So then he gave the go-ahead to make the movie. Now, the story in Reader's Digest mainly follows the life of the son. After he finds out at 16 years old that he is in fact black, and now the movie focuses more on the parents, I would say. Would you agree about that?
Right, but I would say the movie was more truthful and close to the real story at the beginning, but it's towards the end, especially the son's reaction and what he does, that changes drastically from the truth. Let's put it that way.
Well, before we dive into the end part, which is totally not like the real story,
right?
Let's just talk about some of the minor things I noticed at the beginning. First of all, the names, they're all fictitious. Instead of the Johnstons, they are now the Carters. You have Dr. Carter, Dr. Scott Carter, and his wife Marcia instead of Thyra Johnston. And even the son is Albert Jr., and here the son is Howard Carter. And they purposely, in the movie, say, no, I'm not naming my son after after the father. I'm naming it after this other prominent black doctor. And there's a little,
Right,
we won't go into what
to modify the story a bit.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's basically what they were doing. There were sprinklings of the story throughout, I'd say, the first 2/3, but it really wasn't following the true story. Some other minor little things is that, Dr. Johnston, the real life doctor, he first went to Gorham, New Hampshire. That's where he set up his practice. And then he went back to school to be a radiologist, and he ended up in Keene, New Hampshire. So in the story here, in the movie, it's just one town, and they combine Keene and Gorham.
The names of the two, yes.
Yes, into Keenum. And of course, how many children did they have in real life?
Well, they had 4, and in the movie, of course, they had 2. I think sometimes it's just easier to have less characters and to deal with them. So yes, they gave them less children, basically.
Yeah, but overall, I found the first 2/3 were kind of following the story. It's very Hollywoodized. Even when the father reveals to the son that, hey, you really have, you're a black person. You think you're white, but you're actually black. The reaction in real life was very mild. That's in the documentary.
Right. In the documentary, the son says, when they tell him he's part African-American, he just said, I am. Whereas in the movie, he looks at his hands, he goes to the mirror and looks at himself.
Yeah, it was very, even the movie poster shows him looking at his hands almost like horror, like what is this? It's kind of, I guess for the time, it was quite shocking. But I think we should talk about the last third of the movie, because that really is pure fiction. There's nothing of the last third of the movie has anything to do with the real life story. So why don't you say what happened?
Sure. Well, first I'm going to talk a little bit about the Reader's Digest article, which, like you said, is mostly based on the son and his reaction. He actually went through a depression and decided to take a journey and to meet some of his relatives that were African American. And this turned out to be a wonderful experience, and it actually seemed to almost cure him of his depression. And he met members that were blue-collar workers and middle-class workers, and they were very welcoming to him. And in the movie, in fact, he decides, I'm going to go to Harlem to learn about the Black culture. And, of course, none of this really happened, and the portrayal of Harlem is fairly negative, right? If not very negative. Okay.
He's only there like one day, and he's involved in an attempted murder, and he gets arrested, and there's fights. And
even as he arrives in Harlem, the camera pans the neighborhood, and first you see young teenage boys that look a little distrusting and looking at him, and then it pans towards older men who look even more menacing. And it does make you think, well, where are the women and children here? So it's kind of, I think it was from a very much a white perspective and a kind of a fear of the other, and then as you said, he goes on to be in a fight of sorts with a man with a gun, and he is accused of killing someone in the end.
And that's all pure fiction.
None of this ever happened. It was much less dramatic.
And I guess we should quickly talk about the ending also. Now, there's nothing surprising about this movie, so we're not really giving anything away because obviously it's based on a real life story. But the ending takes place in a church. And I should point out, this is a real reverend. So I'm just going to look down at my notes here, and that is in the movie, it's Reverend John Taylor. He's the rector of the church in Portsmouth. In real life, he's played by Reverend Robert A. Dunn of St. John's Church in Portsmouth, and it is filmed in his church with his parishioners. They were all paid to come there and sit there and be filmed as part of the movie. And why don't you just quickly do a quick overview of what happened there?
Yes, so in this scene, the rector gives a sermon about acceptance. And of course, he's really talking about the family that the whole community has since learned is biracial. And it's a little funny because for the most part, it's a positive ending, but there is a point where the daughter gets teary-eyed and she leaves. She leaves all alone, leaves the church, and comes outside. And interestingly enough, her dog is there, which is a pure black, kind of like Scotty dog. And she just walks off with it. And that's really not resolved. But then we come back into the church, and it does seem that the parishioners who were kind of whispering and being a little negative when they arrived into the church, now they seem to be accepting them, shaking their hand. And so to this part, it seems like a happy ending. But it seems like, in fact, we have two endings, I think, which I've never seen before. I thought it was just a little unusual, like they didn't know how to end it.
Yeah, I felt like there were two endings also. Clearly, the acceptance by the community was very clear. But you and I were discussing after the movie ended, what did the girl leaving actually represent? And my feeling is, she was having a hard time dealing with the fact that she has a new racial identity, which is actually what the son experienced. He's the one who, basically quit college and, went across America on an exploration. They never mentioned in Reader's Digest how long that journey across America to California was, but it was long enough for him to spend time with relatives, enroll in college for a while, and then come back. So maybe it was 6 months or a year, whatever.
Right.
So this is kind of what I was saying before. There are little spatterings of the truth, in the movie.
Right, or symbolism.
Right. So even though they didn't tell the story of the son making this journey, so they sent him to Harlem for a totally fictitious thing.
Yes.
They kind of put that onto the daughter. She wasn't, feeling like she was accepted,
Right. And just that it was painful. I think they were emphasizing how painful this all was. I mean, actually, I think we should mention that later on, after the movie came out, 3 years after the movie came out, the doctor lost his position at the hospital, and that people were, as he said in one article, quote unquote, they were picking on me for 3 years. So it was a very difficult situation.
Yeah, and this is probably a good point to talk about the documentary that was filmed 40 years. It was the 40th anniversary of the movie. And, they not just had Thyra Johnston on, but they had some of her friends. And the friends were talking in that episode that they basically fired him from the hospital because of his race.
Right. And they all felt it was wrong. I think the people who knew them very well in the town, their reaction in general was quite good. And as a matter of fact, in the documentary, I believe they said, we kind of always knew, or it was discussed among people. But it was that kind of thing where, just we're not going to talk about it. And so. And
if you see a picture of them, I wouldn't necessarily say they were African American, but you would say, they're not your typical white family, even though they were passing as white. It's very clear that maybe they were Hispanic, maybe they were Hawaiian. Right,
not white European. I think that's what you would say.
Yes, my lack of words there. But yes, they basically weren't white European. So it's very clear, unlike the leads they've chosen for this movie. Now, we should talk about the supporting cast, because that's quite incredible.
So what I would want to say is when I watched it the first time, knowing and seeing a black and white movie made in the 40s, I was pleasantly surprised. There's a big cast when they're representing the community, when they have the doctor applying for jobs at a black hospital. Everyone, of course, there was black. He had a buddy from college who was African American. So there were a lot. There was also the former boxer, Canada Lee, who was pretty famous, right? And he was in the movie. So in other ways, it was quite an unusual movie, and the number of African American extras and actors that they had.
Yeah, I thought that was very well done, and it's not even like they gave them very tiny, insignificant roles. Some of these people had very strong supporting roles, which I really enjoyed.
And the other thing I was going to add too is the parts are not the typical parts. It wasn't a maid, it wasn't a chauffeur. It was the professor who got an award. He was African American, and the police officer. So it wasn't these, positions, these roles where they had, insignificant kind of roles.
Yeah, I've read, and of course you have to take some of this stuff with a grain of salt, but what I've read is that this is the first major Hollywood movie that actually put Black people into prominent positions, not showing them, as you said, as being the maids and the chauffeurs and things like that.
Right,
These were doctors and lawyers and policemen. I don't think a good portion of America ever got to see that before, because that's not how African Americans were portrayed in movies.
Right, and just a movie about race relations. Really, that's what it's about.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I can't think of one that came before that. And then there's that famous one, Guess Who's Coming for Dinner?
Mm-hmm.
But that wasn't until 1967. So it's
Yeah.
almost 20 years later that Hollywood really opened up and considered doing a movie of that subject matter. We should say that he had to pay for that film. He didn't get the funding from Hollywood.
Right. Basically, DeRochemont had to mortgage his home in New Hampshire to fund that movie. But luckily, the movie was a phenomenal success, and he was able to get that back in spades. Now, there was a mention on the Internet Movie Database, not by the database itself, but one of the people making comments. This is one of the top 10 movies of the year grossing, but I checked and that's not true. I don't know where it ranked. It could have been 11 or 15 or 100, but it did experience phenomenal success. And in the documentary, they actually show pictures
Right.
on Broadway of in giant letters, billboards of this movie and the people lining up for it.
Right. And they said it played for 26 weeks. I mean, that to me, I assume that's pretty impressive. Half the year.
Well, if you think about it, movies are coming out so fast. A movie would come out and something else would be a hit and something else and something else. The movies, because this is in the days before people had TVs in their homes.
Right.
So people were going to the movies, and therefore Hollywood was probably at its peak, generating all these movies. So for something to play in the Astor Theater, one of the top theaters on Broadway in New York City, for 26 weeks, that's pretty phenomenal.
Right. But I think we should also add that some places banned it, and it wasn't shown in certain areas.
Yes, basically Atlanta, Georgia banned it, and Memphis, Tennessee banned the movie.
Right.
And in both cases, in general, the argument was, this is not, we don't want to, stir
this
up
could
things.
upset the cart. It could
Right.
cause problems within the community.
And DeRochemont did sue the Atlanta board, that censored the movie, but he lost because basically said that films are not, not like, they don't have the freedom of the press like a newspaper or something else would have.
Interesting.
So basically, whatever the censor board said, that's what stood.
Right.
Now, overall, the response to this movie was very, very positive. The reviews were positive. I could only find one that was somewhat negative. So I'll share the first one. Now, this is from the Daily News. It was written by Dorothy Masters. She gave it 3.5 out of 4 stars. And I'll just read a portion of it. With approximately 8 million persons currently trying to trade their Negro heritage for a place in the white man's realm, Lost Boundaries rates as an important document of the times. Astor's new film is much more than a matter of black and white statistics, however, for the Louis de Rochemont treatment of a factual case encompasses not only social significance, but has also the ingredients of fine cinema. Although there may be some disinterest through the lack of a big-name cast, the production is a superlative account of how a Negro doctor, his wife, and 2 children live as white for 20 years in a small New Hampshire town before the heritage becomes known. In a sense, the hospitals and the Navy are the villains of the piece since they serve as symbols of prejudice. And I guess I'll stop there. It's mostly a positive review, and that's what I found about most of them. But as I said, there was one negative, and I'll turn that over to you, Mary Jane.
Yes, I have that one. That one's from the New York Daily Worker of July 1st, 1949. With this point of view, Lost Boundaries cannot help but be patronizing to the Negro and cannot begin to deal with the question of Jim Crow since it carries at its core a racist orientation. In telling this, the story reveals snobbery and chauvinism at every turn, based as it is on the concept that there is something inherently tragic in being a Negro which calls for tolerance from whites. Thus, the cast of white actors who play the Negroes are the most conventional and most politely unreal middle-class people that Hollywood has ever glorified, as if this were the only way to make their plight appealing. Unable to face up to its theme squarely, the movie leaves the children's relationships with a white girl and a white boy undetermined. Pollyannish and passive, it is the whites, too, who forgive the mistakes of the couple who had attempted to pass. And then he does also go on to say, the son's experiences in Harlem are those of brutality and crime among Negroes, while it is the police who are understanding and kind.
Okay, so I have a few comments on that.
Sure.
First of all, the use of the term Negro, which is definitely, passé, through the whole movie, just that word is used over. I think once or twice they said blacks. Someone once asked me, what's the most offensive thing I keep reading in the newspaper?
Right.
Because I'm always reading, newspapers from 1900, 1910s, 20s, 30s, and so on. And anytime they use the term Negro, I wouldn't say it sends a chill down my spine, but it doesn't sit easy with me because it's always said in a negative light. Negro committed crime. Negro did this. Negro did that.
Right, but did people even say black at the time period? This is 1949.
So all I'm getting at is when I hear that, it makes me a little uncomfortable because I perceive it as a very negative term.
I don't know about then. Did people even say African American in the 40s?
I don't believe so. I remember when I was in school in the 60s, in New York City,
right?
We referred to black people as Negroes. But by, researching the way I do, it makes me feel very, very uncomfortable. Anyway, forgetting about that, let's just talk about the review quickly.
I think in some ways he's being a bit unfair when he says that there's no discussion of, Jim Crow, because after all, this is taking place in New Hampshire. Mm-hmm. It is part of they're trying to tell a story that, is based on a true story. So I don't think Jim Crow comes into it very much. I don't know why he wants them to touch on that. I did think it was a little odd about in the movie, the biracial teenage kids, they break up with their significant others, after they learn that they are part African American. And I thought that was a bit odd too. It's why are you doing this? Why are you both your brother and your sister? Is there some kind of message of I'm not deserving or something now? I had a problem with that also. So I guess I would agree with him there. And we said the same about Harlem a bit, that was a pretty negative scene.
Yeah, very, very negative. It made it look, you can make anything look really bad if you want, and they did a really good job of that in the movie. I hate to say it. The other thing I would say is this review is critical of them casting white people in the leads.
Sure.
And my guess is that was really done because of money. You're putting out so much money that if you put black people in the leads, chances are it would not get played in theaters and people would stay away from it.
Yeah, sadly, I agree with you, right? Yeah. I think we're talking 75 years ago. Mm-hmm. I think that, there wouldn't have been as many people, or let's say white people, interested in seeing the movie. I think, it made a difference.
So we had a discussion after we watched this the second time about one of the actors in this movie, and that's Mel Ferrer. I've also heard it pronounced Mel Ferrar over the years.
Okay.
Why don't you say what was? I had the same exact feeling.
He was not very expressive, and you would expect an actor to be expressive. So
and there's one scene where the son runs away to Harlem, comes back, he's sitting in his office, and I can only speak for myself. If my son came back after he ran away from home for days and ended up being arrested in Harlem, I'd be jumping for joy. And how did he approach it?
He just looked up from his work because he was at a desk, and he said, "Oh, son," it was pretty.
I thought he's a little stiff at times. That's the only way I could describe it. He was a stage actor. Maybe you act a little bit differently on the stage than you do in movies.
I don't know. Maybe he was directed to be kind of stern and that way. Who knows?
But I will say, the Reverend, even though his part was small, I just loved his character. He just seemed so natural and so real, and he was the best cast of anyone in the movie.
I think he was all in with the message. So I think he did, it appeared he really enjoyed doing that. There were other extras that were fairly good too. But,
but he really stood out to me as just being real genuine,
Sure.
So I guess now we're up to the important part. Is this worth seeing? I guess we should first give it a rating. So we're teachers. I'm a retired teacher. You're still teaching. Somewhere between a 0 and a 100. And of course, what we would have rated it back then versus today might be a very different score. I know what. You want me to go first or you want to go first?
Oh, I think you should go first. I forgot about this, so go ahead.
Yes, okay.
Go right ahead.
I would give it, if I just had to go A, B, C, I give it a solid B.
Okay.
It's not a great movie. It's an important movie. There's a difference.
Yeah.
It's a movie that made a difference. As we said, some of the acting is stiff. There are things in this movie, like there are some songs thrown in there that really, they were okay, but they really didn't do anything to advance the movie. In fact, one of the songs was written by the real son.
Right, Albert Jr.
Albert, which is actually the best of the three songs.
I thought it was a great song, actually.
But there's a lot of things wrong with this movie, but I enjoyed it. So
it's fascinating, quite frankly. Actually,
so if I had to give it a numeric value, I'm just going to give it an 85. There are flaws in the movie, but because of what it accomplished, I'm giving it an 85.
Oddly, Steve, that in my mind, I was thinking 85 also. But I would say if you like studying film, if you like film history, especially American film history, you'd have to give it a 95. It was groundbreaking at the time. It really made people talk. It's pretty interesting in that sense. But if you're there to see it for entertainment, it might be an 85 or something like that.
Yeah. And would you say it's a movie you should go out of your way to see or not?
Really depends on who you are. You got to be honest there. Again, if you're someone who really is interested in the history of cinema, you should definitely go see it, and if you're not so interested in that, it's not a great classic, so to speak, but it's very interesting.
Yeah. And as I said to you after we watched it the first time, the fact that we were still talking about it a week later, and here we are all these years later, that we talked about it, we're still talking about it a week later, that movie accomplished its goal. It got people talking. And of course, we know what happened later on in the 50s and 60s. In terms of race relations.
I guess you'd say people who like to analyze movies, to really think about them and talk about them, it's a great movie for that.
Yeah, I would say if you're a couple or two friends or whatever, and you want to watch a movie that you want to discuss afterward, this is a great movie for that.
Right. Yeah.
And what about the documentary?
Oh, I enjoyed it a lot also, just because it kind of filled in the, you see a movie and you're off like, well, what part is true? What part isn't true? And you really learn that from this.
It was very fascinating to see both the mother and the son Albert talking. Right. The mother was interviewed the most in the documentary. And then the son, Albert. But they had, three of the actors who were in the movie. Mel Ferrer was there.
Right, he was there.
But I just found that, and it's only a half hour, and it's on, the PBS New Hampshire site. So it's for free. For free on YouTube, right? And since if you've listened to my previous podcast where I tell the whole true story, it's nice to have that to kind of reinforce.
Yeah, the real people. The wife is very interesting, of course, because her husband had passed, unfortunately, but she really lived through the pain of having to pass. And she kind of gave some answers, like who really pushed him to do that. And she was the one that said, just don't tell them. Just when you're being interviewed, don't tell them. And that's what kind of started the snowball rolling. And
I don't think they intentionally plan to live as white people. I think when he just couldn't get a residency, so he just didn't say. They never asked, right? And then he got a job as a doctor, and no one asked. But by the time he applied to be in the military in World War II, he did check off the box that he was white, and of course his children believed they were white also. So in that sense, they were living a little bit of a lie. But once it all was out in the open, he actually reflected back. He was asked, shortly after the movie that if he had to do it over again, he would not hide his race.
Right. I mean, I do know the wife also, she was the one that was alive for the documentary, but she said that she also said to him, let's tell the story, because they said they talked for hours trying to decide whether they should let the Reader's Digest do this story. And she was also kind of just sick of the lie, so to speak,
So if you had to choose one of the two to start with, should you watch the movie first or should you watch the documentary? Knowing that you know the story I told, should you start with the documentary or start with the movie?
I kind of like the order that we did do, to watch the movie and then see, how much of this is real, how much of this isn't. I liked that order. Yeah.
Of course, when we watched the movie the first time, I had only given you the bare basics of the story. I probably told you too much. I probably should have not told you anything. Now, I don't remember when I suggested doing this. It was a while back. I said to you,
the summer.
Because I've known the story for a while. As typical, people ask, where do you find these stories? I honestly don't remember where I found the story. I was just going through stuff one day, and I'm like, this, and I think we were getting ready for bed, and I said, hey, maybe we should consider doing a movie review on this. And I would tell the real story first, and then we would follow up with the Hollywood movie that was made from it. Although technically it's not Hollywood because it was filmed in New Hampshire, but it was a big budget movie.
Yeah, the style was still very Hollywood-like, though.
Yeah. So anyway, I guess we both enjoyed the movie, and
yeah, for sure.
And I'd say it's more of a forgotten movie.
Completely, right?
I mean, it's a forgotten movie, but it's one that we both enjoyed watching. Even with all its flaws, it was still a good movie to watch. I should mention it's for free on the Internet Archive and on YouTube. So you don't have to pay for it. The Internet Archive is very easy to pull up. YouTube, everybody uses.
Right.
Although I question whether the YouTube copy is there legally, since they're also selling it. You can rent the movie on YouTube also at the same time.
Really?
So I think someone just illegally put the copy up there.
Okay.
I'm not sure if the copyright's still in effect on that or not. So, on the Internet Archive, it may be legal, may not be. I'm not really sure about that. But it is there until it disappears. And if you want to watch it, check it out. Anyway, Mary Jane, I guess we should bring this
Steve?
to a close. You can go into hiding for another 2.5 years, 3 years. No. Thanks for. I know you have a lot of work to do. You're in a brand new job.
Yeah.
You have to get to work this afternoon. So thanks for recording this with me.
No, it was enjoyable.
Yes. Anyway, let's say goodbye to everyone. Take care, everyone. Bye.
All right, bye.